And so the lesson was my sole purpose on this planet is not to make and keep other people happy. I have a lot more important things to do, I guess, than sit around and worry about how other people feel about every single thing I do.
When the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, you will change. It takes courage to look in the mirror and truly see who you are. What do you believe? What brings you joy? What do you really want? Today's guest took the leap, asked herself some hard questions, and didn't love everything she discovered, but decided to do something about it. Jordan, you are brave, bold, and wise beyond your years. Your willingness to be vulnerable and share what you've learned for the benefit of others is inspiring. You are both lovable and likable. Please welcome today's guest, Jordan Winke. Hey, Jordan.
Hello. Hi, Aunt Claire.
It's so awesome to see you, and I'm so excited about this podcast with you.
Yes, thank you for having me on. I'm also very excited to get started.
You did hear her just call me Aunt Claire. Jordan is my niece, and I asked you the other day, Jordan, what year you were born, because I was trying to figure out exactly what was happening in my life at the time. So 25 years ago is when we met for the first time. You were 11 months old, and it was my first time to the lake. I was really nervous because it was, I was meeting what would be my future husband's family. But you were actually my saving grace because I was comfortable with kids and with babies. I'm like, let me just hold Jordan. Yeah, I don't want to talk to the adults right now. Let me just talk to Jordan.
Right. Yep.
So you are the oldest of our nieces and nephews. And when I was driving the car yesterday, I also realized that when I actually met you, I was 26. So when I met you,
Oh,
I was exactly your age right now. Isn't that
okay.
crazy?
That's funny. Yeah, that is because I know there's a picture of us.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. You know I'm gonna
from
have to post it. I'm gonna have to add it here.
Yeah, yeah, of you holding me. It was probably from that same trip, but
Yeah.
I can vividly remember that picture. So,
You were 11 months old then, and then a few years later, I think you were 5 at our wedding. And then so I've seen you clearly your entire life. Lots of time at the lake together, just as you were growing up. And then I got to be at your graduation for high school. I got to visit you at college. I got to be part of some of your first. So the first time you got on a plane by yourself. Do you remember that?
yep.
Coming to Super Bowl 50, you were checking out whether sports event management was for you. And so I think you were 18 at the time.
I think I was 17 even. It was my junior year of high school. Yeah.
So your very first event ever, Super Bowl 50. I mean, not too shabby.
No, no. There have been worst firsts for sure.
Yes, for sure. And then a couple years later, you came to Columbus, Ohio, when it was freezing cold for women's Final Four, and you immediately knew you were not supposed to be a part of transportation.
Yes, I do remember that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. So kind of just been little pieces and moments throughout your life so far. And I have loved, especially in this last year, getting to talk to you more. I am so, so proud of you for so many reasons. I love so many things about you. I could go on for days. I think for right this second, the reason why I really wanted you to be on this podcast with me is because it doesn't matter when you start your journey of growth. It's better if you start earlier. And in this last couple of years, you have done that. And with no other prompting but your own desire to actually get better, improve, and make changes in your life. And so it's been awesome to just hear your journey. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Like you said, fairly new to it, but the changes that I've seen in myself over the last couple of years and just the way that it's impacted all of my relationships and like every aspect of my life, words don't really do it justice.
Yes, yes. And you know what? I work with a lot of women, have for the last 20 years, coaching, and what we find the most is the things that they're struggling with today in their 30s and 40s actually started in their teens and early 20s, and they just had never realized they need to work through it. And so the benefit of you working through it now is that you now don't have all that the time in between that you are struggling through it and not realizing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was starting to notice patterns in my relationships and just in my choices. I felt like I was kind of just stuck repeating the same things over and over again. And I was kind of just reached a breaking point where it was like, something has to change here because I'm not getting any results. I'm not getting where I want to be doing things the way I've always done them.
Yeah.
And the only constant thing throughout all of those relationships was me. So I said, I guess like I probably need to start with myself first. And so that was kind of what started the whole transformation process, was just noticing, okay, something's got to change here.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your background, a little bit about just growing up and college, maybe.
Okay. Yep. So I grew up in southern Iowa, a very very small town. I graduated with 75 people. I had a lot of really close, tight knit friendships. It was almost more like a family than just kids who you go to school with, because you spent the first 18 years of your life with the same people in the same town. And so I got really into running. Track and field started when I was in seventh grade. And that was one of the first things that I ever did that was like, feels like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm.
I loved it, and that carried on all through high school. I quit running right after my senior year of high school, and I said, I just want to go to college and be a student. I don't want to run anymore. I was super burnt out, and a lot of it was just self inflicted internal pressure. I developed a pretty bad relationship with it, and it took all of the fun out of something that I
Mm.
used to really love. And so I went to the University of Iowa. I was in a sorority my freshman year. That was not for
Was
me.
not a fit for you.
And Claire's laughing because if you know me very well, you would know right away that that's probably not going to be a
Not you.
fit for Jordan. So I realized like how much I missed running. Gosh, probably within 2 weeks of getting to college, I was like, oh boy, like I think I really miss it. So I ended up training by myself my freshman year, and then I walked on to the cross country team the summer after my freshman year. That would have been 2018. And then I was on the team from 2018 through 2020. In that time, I had 4 stress fractures, and I spent more time in the training room than I did running,
Yeah.
rehabbing, and stuff. So then COVID hit, and it seemed like a natural time to be like, all right, this isn't working for me either. Like, I want to be able to run again without pain, and I don't know if this is the setting where I'm going to be able to do that. And
Yeah.
so COVID hit, quit track, never went back to a classroom, graduated sitting in my living room in Iowa City.
Was it the last 2 years of your of college?
Yep, last year and a
Yeah.
half, I guess. So it would have been the second semester of my junior year, and then my whole senior year were online. My first job out of college was at a marketing agency in Iowa City, and I loved it. It was really fun. I made some great friends, some of my best friends I met working there. Fantastic first job, but I'm not wired for like inside sitting down kind of job. And so I ended up quitting to work for my dad and do video production, media production, and work on his farm. I quit and started doing that in 2022. So since then, when people ask me, what is your job? I'm like, I don't even really know technically how to describe it.
Well, tell them what your dad does, because I mean, people that are in that world will obviously know him, but if they're not, so what does he do?
So he has a bow hunting YouTube channel, and it would take a whole nother podcast to go into the whole backstory of like all of that. But it's his second show that he started, and it's about how to hunt deer, how to manage land, how to like strategies and farm tactics and that those types of things. So I didn't really know anything about it. I mean, I grew up around it, but I didn't know anything about it when I started working for him. So it's been an awesome learning experience the last couple of years. Just, I mean, to me, the most interesting and fulfilling part is the land side of it, like the conservation and learning how to make things grow. Why plant this, or why don't you plant that? Or how do you take care of the soil and bring back native species? And just, it gives me a new appreciation for, I guess, our natural resources and maintaining those, and just for the
Yeah.
whole sport in general. Yeah, that's so I work on the farm. I live in a barn for a good, and I do mean I live in the barn.
I
Claire,
know.
I'll send you some pictures to throw in
I
too.
need to
But
see them.
it's very much Little House on the Prairie sometimes, but I love it. It's the most Jordan job you could possibly
Well, and
make
you've
up.
been on the road with your dad a lot in the
Yep.
last couple of years, right?
Yep.
For
One of the things on my bucket list is to visit every national park and to go for a run in all 50 states. And so, since my dad is my boss, and when he says, do you want to go on a road trip? I say, well, you're the boss. Yeah. If you're saying we can go on a road trip, then let's go. So, he's
yeah.
been helping me check off national parks, and really last year I think we visited 7,
Oh
maybe?
my gosh.
Yeah, so it was like 2 or 3-week-long road trips, and we slept in the truck, and we camped, and we just had a fantastic time, so that's been really awesome. Just a great way to spend time with him and a great way to, like, just experience and see more of those awesome natural places that
Yeah,
yeah.
that's very cool. So you've been alone. It sounds really funny when I say it like that, but you've been kind of in the middle of nowhere a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And so, how did that both help and, what does that have to do with everything with your relationships?
Okay, well, to get into, like, the real nitty-gritty of it, I was in, like, not a great relationship for a few years, and then that ended in 2022, and I was at the stage of life where, like, my friends were all moving and moving on with their lives and, like, getting into serious relationships, and, like, the band was kinda breaking up, and it sounds funny, but, like, I guess I didn't know that would happen. Like, you never
Yeah,
really think about what happens when this ends when you're in the middle of it,
right.
and the next thing I knew, it was over, and, like, all my friends had kind of moved on with their lives to different things as life changes, and I was still in the same place. I was still in Iowa City, but without the people who made it feel like home. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of the end of a relationship, a lot of friendships, kind of the nature of those changed. And I found myself alone for the first time in Iowa City. I still worked at the marketing agency. I had never been forced to sit there by myself and have nobody to do things with, because before, if
Mm,
I could just distract myself, I could go out with friends, I could go do whatever it was. I never had to actually process or deal with any of my negative emotions and stuff. And so then I'll never forget, it was July 2nd, 2022, and there was a 4th of July fireworks display in Iowa City, and I couldn't think of a single person who I could ask to go watch that with me. And that was the
mm,
moment when I just was like, I'm so lonely. And it was like a very crippling, what am I supposed to do? I didn't have a very good relationship with myself. I wasn't particularly nice to myself. I didn't like myself. And so not having other people to distract me from those feelings and stuff, I was pretty miserable, pretty depressed for a while, where I didn't like myself and I didn't have
yeah.
anyone else to hang out with.
Were you aware that you didn't like yourself? You probably had never processed that before.
No, I don't think I knew it at that point. I think I just knew that I felt lonely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think that I was aware of how much I didn't like myself and how cruel I was to
to
myself.
yourself.
I think that came later, but I quit to start working for my dad in September of 2022, and that took being alone to a whole different level, because
Yes,
all
no
of a
kidding.
sudden, I was like, I think it was 45 minutes from the closest Walmart. It was like 2.5 hours from Iowa City, like on
Oh
the
my
farm in a barn.
Yeah,
And I
with
mean,
dad.
with dad
Yeah,
for weeks on end.
yes.
So you're gonna have to deal with things, or not, but you're probably gonna have to deal with them in that setting. Like, you can't
Yeah,
really avoid them or run from them
yeah.
there. And that was really the moment where I realized, I don't even know how it all started, but I started, like, realizing how mean I was to myself. When I would make friends or meet people, I would try to figure out what they wanted me to be, and I would just
Mhm.
become who I thought they would like, or like whatever. Oh, do they want the track girl? Do they want the, like, happy go lucky, or the party girl, or the outgoing? Like, I would just put on that costume and be that person. I had no sense of self.
Yeah.
I didn't know who I was or what I stood for. And so to not have anyone else's framework to try to fit into, it left me
Mm,
feeling super,
lost,
like,
maybe.
yeah, lost and
Yeah,
lonely. And so I
yeah.
think it was just dealing with those feelings that I realized, wow, I started paying attention to how I talked to myself, and I realized how mean I was. Like, I had no grace or empathy or forgiveness for myself. It was a very, like, negative, cruel, like, harsh internal monologue. And then I realized I would not be friends with someone who talks to
Mm,
me the way that I talk to myself. And I would certainly never talk to one of my friends like that.
right.
And so why am I doing that to myself?
Yeah.
And that was really the inciting incident of, like, my journey of growth, or just trying to become a better person, was realizing when all the distractions are, like, stripped away and you're just left with yourself. I mean, you spend a lot of time in your own head, and you need to make it like a nice place to be.
Well, the thing is, that's what you did. I will say other people would have done something maybe more destructive. I mean, obviously that was constructive to be mean to yourself, but you could have coped. You could have turned to alcohol, you could have turned to drug, you could have done something to numb, which happens more often than I think we'd like to even admit happens in the world.
Yeah, and there was a stretch, like, especially in college where you don't call it numbing and you don't call it destructive or distracting, but it is, because
Hmm.
you're constantly numbing and distracting yourself from having to ever deal with those emotions and things, and alcohol was a bigger part of my life. I wouldn't say it was ever a problem, but it definitely played a role of like, "Oh, I can't wait for the weekend so I can go out with my friends." That was one of the biggest things I looked forward to, and but like you said, I think that happens a lot more than people realize, and it gets kind of glamorized in college culture and in young adult life. It becomes a central fixture for a lot of people, and it's detrimental even though people don't really realize it sometimes. So cutting out a lot of that has helped me a lot too.
Yeah. You're delaying any kind of work that you would ever do to actually look at the truth about yourself.
Yeah, yep.
Um, in this context as we're talking about it. So your journey started, you said like January was it of last year where you really, because you've been kind of talking about how you've been cruel to yourself. So where did you start with starting to get to know yourself and fall in love with Jordan, the
Well,
real Jordan?
I would say like the biggest and most helpful thing to me has been journaling. And like at first, before I ever tried it, people would talk about it. I was like, oh yeah, like what am I gonna write about? Like, sure, journaling. But then I tried it, and being able to like work through your thoughts, put them into words, put them down on paper has helped me immense more than words can describe. Like identify patterns in my thinking, identify specific negative thoughts and feelings that I have that I don't even know
You're
I'm
not aware
feeling,
of. Yeah.
right, until I write them down. And well, the first time I ever tried to write like a love letter to myself was one of the first journal prompts that I ever did. And I sat there and I stared at the Google Doc for like 3 hours, and all I came up with was like a quantitative bullet point list of facts about myself. It wasn't even a remotely love letter. I was
Yeah.
like, wow. I think of all of my friends, and I could have written them 10-page love letters about all the reasons why I love them. And I was like, all I can do is a bullet point list for myself. Like,
Mm.
something's got to change. And
Yeah.
so then I started paying more attention to how I thought about myself throughout the day, and like the things that I was telling myself. If something went wrong, or if I had like a bad run or a bad workout, I was paying more attention to how critical I was, or how my first reaction was to be like, come on, just do better. Like, surely you can do better than that, or like pull it together. Like, it was very, very critical.
Mm.
And so identifying that, and then after you identify it, you can kind of catch it and like change it as the thoughts are happening. And then when you
Yeah.
do that over and over for a long enough time, your habits and your patterns shift to where it's
Right.
a lot more positive.
Right. Because you're self-aware. You can't change something if you're not aware of it.
Right, right.
Right? I mean, just like running, you can't change something that's going wrong if you're not paying attention or you don't measure it. There's no way to know something is wrong.
100%. And another thing that with the journaling that helped me was at first I would write it in like the second person. So it'd be like, you felt lonely today, or you had a bad day and you feel anxious. And putting it into that second person and saying, kind of distancing myself from those emotions instead of saying, I am lonely. It was more like, you felt lonely. You don't have to identify with those negative things. You can just accept and like notice, hey, this is how I felt today. That doesn't mean that I am lonely or I
Right.
am anxious. They're just feelings. You
Right.
can feel things and then not let it impact your actions, or let it impact how you see yourself. You can just
Right.
move past them. And so,
It's not who you are.
right,
It's
right.
just a moment in time of either a behavior or a feeling.
Yep, yep.
Mhm.
And so I starting to identify that really helped me a lot too. And just honestly being more self-aware and just noticing my patterns and my thoughts and my feelings, and like, if I do this, then I tend to feel like this. And oh, if I do this, I feel really good about it. And just picking up on those things and writing them down and keeping track of it, you start to kind of get a better idea of who you are as a person and like
Yeah.
how you work. Whereas I'd never really put any thought into that before.
Right. I think often we think that we're helpless and that there's nothing we can do about it. But what you just said sounds so basic, but it is every time I eat sugar, my stomach hurts.
Yeah,
Oh, well, maybe that means I shouldn't eat sugar. It's
Yeah.
just making those connections of when I do this, this is what happens.
Yep. And that's when you identify those patterns of like, if I do this, then I feel that. And instead of trying to bully yourself into being a better person, like, come on, you can do this, you have to do this, other people do it. You can approach it from a place of love where, hey, I I don't want to feel like this anymore and like you don't want to feel like this anymore. So in an effort to take care of yourself, to be the person who you want to be, cutting
Mhm.
back on this behavior is going to be good for you in the long run. Just giving yourself more grace and kind of talking to yourself the way you would talk to a friend or a little kid. That was one of the first things that helped me too was how would I talk to my 10-year-old self? Would I yell at her for making a mistake? No. I would say,
Mhm.
"Hey, now you know better. Next time we can do better. It's okay to mess up. Like don't let it derail all of your progress."
If someone has never journaled before, like, and I hear what you're saying, that you're saying things in the second person, but what kinds of things did you start to write right at the beginning when you were trying to learn?
Well, I guess it was more, here's how I feel today. It was more because I was using it as a tool to kind of figure out how I feel and like why try to work through some depression and stuff. But it would be here's how I feel, here's what I was upset or what made me happy today, what made me sad today. Like, here are the things that are going on in my life right now. This is how
Yeah.
I feel about them. And just really keeping track of those types of things. And then after I got better at that, it turned into more anytime I journal about everything. Sometimes I journal like twice a day now, just because
Yeah.
I find it easier to work through the thoughts and like after I write them down, I can stop thinking about them. Whereas if
Yes.
I don't, otherwise they'll just keep running around in my head and they're distracting. Honestly, just starting with like almost a diary. Like it
Yeah.
sounds funny, but a grown-up diary of like, here's what happened today and like, here's how I feel. It was really how I got started and one of the ways that I think it was the most useful for me.
Yeah, it's very powerful. And the reason I'm asking is because I think some people get caught up in the, well, how do I do it? And which is the right way and the wrong way? There is no wrong way.
No,
It is whatever is coming out of your brain, write it down.
100%. And some of it is terrible, some of it is really good, and some of it, but that's not even, that doesn't matter. Whether it's good or bad, it's just, it's for you. No one else is
Right.
ever going to read it. And I tend to be a perfectionist and I enjoy writing and reading. And so I kind of will catch myself beating myself up about, oh, this journal entry is bad. Who cares? Bad according to who? This isn't graded. So
Yeah.
just write
Yeah.
it down. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right. So I was it 2022? You probably had a 2023 one also, but lessons you learned in 2023 or 2022.
Hmm.
Do you want to kind of walk through a few of them because they're so good?
Yes.
There's so many. We won't have time for all of them, but we'll
Yeah.
about a few of them.
So those were things that I kind of gathered out of my journal entries throughout the year. At the end of the year, I was like, what are some of the overarching and repetitive topics and things that I've talked about and learned? And so I ended
Mhm.
up with a list of things that I learned, and it's kind of another way to describe it would be like things I wish I could tell my younger self. If I had 10 minutes with my 20-year-old self, those are the things that I would want to tell her. And
Awesome.
so, one of the things that I learned is you are your own worst critic. And that's something that I touched on a little bit with the running, but it also applies to social interactions and stuff too, because I was super critical of myself. And like
Mhm.
I've said, I didn't really like myself that much. And so, I was analyzing every interaction I had with people through a lens of someone who doesn't like them.
Mm.
Whereas, because it was me and I didn't
Yeah.
like me. So I was like, oh, that you were really annoying. They don't like you. Why did you say that? That was weird. Well, no one else is thinking that because they
Like
don't
you.
inherently dislike you.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that I learned is I was my own worst critic and nobody else was judging me as harshly or as severely as I was judging myself. And after I learned that, it was way easier for me to have good friendships and relationships with people because instead of assuming, oh, they don't like me and they're just looking for ways that I'm messing up or it's only a matter of time until I mess up, it was like, hey, like maybe they actually like me and maybe it's not fair to just assume that people inherently don't like you. And
Yeah.
the more I liked myself, the easier it was to remember that I am my own worst critic. So another one of the things that I really internalized is people love you because you are you, not despite you being you.
Mm.
Growing up, kids pick on and bully each other if they're different. And so then you end up thinking, oh, well, I have to round out all of these weird qualities about myself because they're weird and like people don't like them. But then as I got older, I stopped and I realized all of my favorite things about my friends are their unique, weird, quirky qualities. I can list off dozens of things that make all of my best friends them, like
Yeah.
uniquely them. And
So can you think of one right now as an example
about
of anybody? It could be about you or it could be about a friend.
my some of my best friends in college had a very specific words and phrases that they would use all the time, and nobody else uses those. And they're on the surface kind of odd phrases, but they are them, and I love that about them. And one of my best friends from college was extremely unabashedly himself. Like he was the same person no matter who he was around, no matter what social setting it was. You knew you were getting him, and it
Yeah.
didn't change. And I loved and admired that about him so much because he had such a secure and strong sense of self that other people's reception of him didn't sway his own behavior. And I think that's very, very hard to do. And it's natural to kind of tone yourself down or balance yourself out.
Mm.
Like, oh, I don't know if people will like this. I got to kind of keep it covered up. But that robs people of getting to actually know you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that kind of wrapped up the whole
Yeah.
topic there. But one of my favorite things about him was the fact that he was so him. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of a case in point of quirky qualities about yourself that you're like, I don't know if people will like these. That's what makes you you.
You.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the best.
Another thing that I learned, and this one was more recently, but I spent a good chunk of my life trying to make and keep everyone around me happy. And I never really stopped to consider what I want or what I think or what I feel or what I enjoy or anything. And so the lesson was my sole purpose on this planet is not to make and keep other people happy. I have a lot more important things to do, I guess, than sit
Yes.
around and worry about how other people feel about every single thing I do. And oh, what if they get upset or what if they don't like it? Well, that's not really my problem as long as I'm living my life in a way that I think is correct and good and like, according to my values and morals and principles. How other people receive that isn't really my concern. And the more secure my sense of self gets and the more I like myself, the more it genuinely stops mattering if
Yeah.
other people like it or like you or like your behavior or not.
Yeah. And the ironic thing is, the sooner you start being yourself, the sooner you actually attract the people that will love every bit of you.
Mm-hmm.
The people that want to be around you are the ones who know who you are.
Right.
So, an example would be actually your cousin Shania. This is one example of, she said, I really want to make sure that the people that I meet also love to travel. And what I said to her is, well, if you just keep traveling, you're going to be around people who like to travel,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So you're the same with running. I mean, you don't have to like issue around people who run. If you just run, people that run are going to be around you. So it's
Yep.
really the same
That
with just who you are.
100%. I'm trying to think of a. Oh, there was a quote that my dad. He said this when I was going off to college. I'll never forget it. He said, "You'll find the people who are supposed to be in your life when you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing." It should be framed on the wall. It's so true. If you go out of your way to constantly try to make friends or whatever, you're going to stray away from the things that you actually want to be doing.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be like, oh, well, this isn't where I want to be. And these aren't really the kind of friends that I want. But if you just do the things that you're supposed to be doing and the things that you enjoy and like you're living your life in a way that like, you're proud of and that is good according to your own set of morals and values, like you're going to find the people who are supposed to be there. You don't have to go looking for them.
Yeah. Do you know what? This also actually even applies to the career path you choose, the place that you live. It applies to everything. Because
Mm-hmm.
the sooner you're true to yourself and really honest with, I hate this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
I love this kind of work. You know, what
Yep.
is it that you actually like to do? It's where you're going to attract exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
100%.
Yeah.
So another one of the things that I learned, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, but learning how to be alone without being lonely is one of the most empowering things I've ever done. Because, like I said, in 2022, I was just lonely. I was alone and I was lonely. And now I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. Like I like myself. I enjoy spending time by myself and with my thoughts and like learning how to be nice to yourself and like be alone and not constantly crave the validation or the attention or the distraction of external factors, whether that's people or behaviors or whatever. Like when you can truly be alone and be happy and be content just spending time with yourself, it makes it so much easier to go into other relationships and to make friends and to meet people and even like dating. If you enjoy being alone, whether or not a date goes well doesn't really matter. It takes all the pressure off. It takes all of the expectations off because it's like worst case scenario, I'm single. Okay, I like being single. Best case scenario, we fall in love. Great, that sounds great too. It's not like a, oh, what if he doesn't like me or oh no, I like being single just fine. And so if I find someone who complements that, that's just icing on the cake. Even friendships and obligations and things, when you start weighing it against your peace and when being alone brings you peace and it's comfortable
Yeah.
and you start saying, is this worth just learning how to be alone and spend time by yourself and feel capable taking care of yourself and just secure in who you are and liking yourself, it makes all of your other relationships, it's easier to be in them, it's easier to be a good friend, it's easier to enter them with like optimistic mentality because other people's behaviors and actions aren't a threat to you. You don't have to take it
Right.
personally.
Takes the pressure off.
It's yes, exactly.
Yeah, you have. Let's see. Just because nobody else seems to think something is valuable doesn't mean it isn't worth it. This is your life and you get to decide what is important to you.
I'm trying to think of how I can concisely summarize that one. We might have to skip that one. That would be like a 30-minute.
Okay, we'll skip that one.
Okay. It's a
All
good
right.
one.
It is a really good one. I mean, you actually did concise, you did make it more, there was more in here that you wrote. You put, if it feels like a big deal to you, it's a big deal. You're allowed to call it heartbreak if your heart is broken.
Yeah, I don't know if I can summarize that one.
It's all right. All right. It's good even just that by itself.
Like I said, I had this really super tight knit, very, very close group of friends in college. And I mean, we had a blast together. They were some of the best friends I've ever had. Like, it was just so much fun and just all loved each other, great friends. Well, and then it ended. And
Yeah.
like I said, I mean, it sounds silly to say it, but I guess I never thought it was going to end. Like, because when you're doing it, you don't think, oh, everyone's going to move away and like get into relationships and we won't do this anymore. You're just enjoying it.
Right.
But then it was over, and the aftermath of it was almost worse than never having experienced it because I knew what I was missing out on, and I knew what it felt to feel like, yes, this is where I'm supposed to be, and like these are the people I'm supposed to be with, and then that changed. It was a long time of me like holding on to those days and being like, no, these are like the best days ever. How am I ever gonna have that fun again? Every time I would go out or meet people, I would compare those days and those people to my old group of friends. Oh, well, they're not them. Like, this
Mm,
isn't as good because it's different. Well, the thing I learned is just because it's different doesn't mean it can't be equally good.
yeah.
And so holding on so tightly to those good old days stopped me from seeing how good today is and like the good todays. Because just because things are different doesn't mean they're worse. It's just a different kind of good, or maybe it looks different, but you have to accept change and let go of those good old days. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to be present and make more good
Mm,
days
right.
today.
So in this last, I think it's been a month and a half. Wow. It's been a month and a half already. You made a massive change, actually. Talk about being able to move on. What happened in the like 6 weeks ago,
So I moved to Des Moines from Iowa City. I had
which
been
is
in
like
Iowa
how
City.
far?
What'd you say? Sorry.
How far is that?
It's like an hour and a half
Okay.
west. So it isn't that far, but it was far enough. I had been in Iowa City for 7 years. I'd been in the same house for five. So it was all of my college days and then the last few years after that. And going along with the holding on too tightly to the good old days, I was super hesitant to move because those were the best days ever in my mind. And oh, I can't let go of this. I can't move on.
Yeah.
What happens next? Well, that's the thing. You never get to find out what happens next if you don't move on. It was almost like the good old days were a ball and chain around my ankle, like keeping me from seeing more good things and experiencing more good days because they were keeping me tight and stuck in one place. And so one of my goals for myself for this year was to start doing more things because it's what I want to do instead of what other people want me to do or what I think will make other people happy. And I was like, well, I don't want to live here anymore. I don't want to live in Iowa City anymore. And so I moved to Des Moines.
Yes. Did you find it was a geographic move, but I think the geography has a little bit less to do with what it actually, I think, did for you mentally, right? And
Mm-hmm.
emotionally.
Yep.
So what did it do for you by doing that?
It took me away from like the physical location of all of those good old days because I couldn't go on a run in Iowa City or go out to eat or do anything without a constant barrage of, oh, remember when, or oh, I remember when we used to blah, blah, blah. It was just like everything was soaked in memory. Even when I wanted to move on, ugh, I have to go to this place again. It was just constant reminders of the old days. And so I figured the best way that I can actually move on with my life is to get away from all of
Physically get
the,
away. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, people don't always have the luxury of physically moving away, but even
Mm-hmm.
if you symbolically move away from, I mean, you were talking about something very specific, but this also applies to people that are, it could be relationships, could be a career, could be just a life that you don't want anymore. And to symbolically move, sometimes the physical move makes all the difference to be able to let you cut it off so that you can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's so
And it
powerful.
is so powerful. And in my mind, it kind of established the ending of one book. I was finally able to just close that book and say, this was a heck of a ride. Great book. Put it on the shelf, open a new one, and start. And not constantly keep flipping back through the pages of the old book and like trying to pencil stuff into the margins and be like, wait, no, I don't want to close this book yet. You
Yeah.
can't start the next one and go on new adventures and see new things and experience more of your life when you're constantly just rereading the old book over and over and over again. And so for me, the move was as much just a symbolic closing of one book, opening of a new one as it was anything else.
Yeah. John Maxwell writes, he's written a gazillion leadership books, but one thing that he says is short phrase, and I have it written everywhere. And it is just yesterday ended last night.
Mm-hmm.
Good or bad. It
Mm-hmm.
was a great month. It was an awful month. It doesn't matter. I won my race. I lost my race. It doesn't matter. That was yesterday, and today is a new day.
Yep.
But it's really powerful.
That's similar to another quote, and it's the most simple thing, the sentiment, but it's the sun's gonna rise tomorrow. And when my mental health was at its worst and I was really struggling with depression pretty bad, just the thought of like the sun will rise tomorrow. This is temporary, how I feel right now, it will pass. Even when it feels like it won't. You don't think it's going to, it does every single time. The sun always rises again the next day. Maybe it's metaphorically, maybe tomorrow it isn't necessarily better, but like in time, things will pass and the sun always rises.
Yeah, so good. So that actually, so you've picked up some habits. You already talked about journaling that helps with your anxiety and helped you to fall in love with yourself. Are there any other habits that you've added, or that you know that you have that helps you with your mind?
Yeah, one of the things that I've found is when I'm feeling especially anxious or my thoughts going a million miles per hour, doing things that require enough thought to distract me or to break me out of that cycle, but not so much thought that it's like, challenging. So like Legos, puzzles, baking,
Yeah,
anything that just is like, okay, I have to follow directions. It gives you enough of something to think about that it kind of is able to help me shut down those anxious thoughts a little bit and just shift my focus to something else. And so those have all been really, really helpful.
that's so good.
Yeah.
Have you figured out? Can you recognize when you're starting to go down the wrong path in your mind?
Yeah, I'm getting better about it. It used to just feel like it was a loose cannon. The switch could flip at any time, and I felt like I was more a ship on the waves, and I just had to ride it, and
That's a good.
had no like control over it. But
Mm-hmm.
now I feel like if I can kind of feel my mood like drop a little bit or like something starts to set it off, I see an old picture, I hear an old song, whatever, shifting my thoughts to something that's very not emotional, whether that's work related or whether that's something super objective,
Mm-hmm.
usually helps me instead of letting my emotions just go and run. Who knows where we're going to end up, but we're going. And so instead of focusing on something that's productive or you can see progress or even just something that has no emotion tied to it really
Yeah.
helps me not turn off my emotions but just redirect them to something because I think it's not always helpful advice when people are like, "Oh, just think about something else." Okay, like what? This is
Yeah.
all I can think about. And sometimes when I am feeling like that, it isn't super helpful to just, oh, I'll try to be happy. I'll force myself to be happy, so just forcing myself to be neutral or
Yeah.
shooting towards neutrality instead of super high or super low.
Hmm.
You can usually accomplish that even when you are down and you're like, I don't think I can be super happy right now. That's fine. You can just be
Just
not
be here.
super sad.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's progress.
It is progress. So, running, I'm going to come back to running again because it is a huge part of your life. So, I think when we ended at the very beginning, you said you stopped running. Now, did you start again? And what part does it play now in your life?
Gosh, yeah, we could have done a whole separate podcast on running alone,
Uh
but
huh. Your lessons from learning. I've seen
oh
yes, you have
yeah.
so many.
I started running again after all of my stress fractures. It was a constant couple year cycle. It was pretty brutal. Every time I would get healthy, I would get hurt again, and it was just a constant cycle of I never really got into shape because I was always just rehabbing and stuff. Well, then I changed my form and I changed my shoes and I like made some changes and I was able to stay healthy for a really long time. But one of the mentality shifts I had was I'm doing this because it's fun. And so like I wasn't training for anything. I wasn't on a team. I was like it was almost for the love of it. It was the only reason I was going. And so I tried to keep it as fun as possible. I never punished myself with running. I never forced myself to go when I didn't want to. Because I was, look, I just want this to be something I enjoy again. Like, I'm trying to find the love for it again, and I don't think I'm going to do that if I dread it.
Hmm.
And so, what I found was that, like, when you keep it fun and you take the pressure off because it's not who you are, it's just something you do, it's way easier to be consistent. And then with consistency comes improvement, and improvement is fun. And so without
Progress.
even, yeah, like without even trying, I ended up getting into better shape than I've ever been in my whole life. And I ran PRs in the 5K and the half marathon last fall. And then I had a stress fracture, my fifth one. But again, like, because of all the progress I've made on my like mind and mental health, it was almost like I'll be back. It didn't send
Yes.
me down a horrible spiral like it would have in years past. It was like, you know what? Like I'm gonna learn how to swim and I'm gonna learn how to exercise biking and I'll use this time to get super strong and then when I can run again, I'll start running again. Like you play the hand you're dealt. You
You're doing what you can with what you have in the
yeah,
moment.
100%.
Yeah. So I'm going to go off course for just a second because I know that there will be a ton of younger people also that are going to watch this. Like my other niece, Caitlin, who has I don't know if she has a love for running quite yet, but she's definitely very competitive like you were.
Mhm.
So what advice would you give someone who is about to go to another level? Like how would you keep it fun? Because what you're saying is so wise. Like
Yeah.
keep the pressure off yourself.
Well, the best advice I can say is like accepting that it's a gift and like I didn't do anything to earn my ability
Mhm.
to run. So I can't take credit for it. And if I can't take credit for it, then I can't really make it a huge part of my personality because it's just a gift I was given. And so keeping it separate from my identity, it lets the
Mhm.
wins and losses impact you less and you can keep it more fun when you're not just on this constant roller coaster of, oh, I won, I'm on top of the world. Oh, I lost, I suck, this is terrible.
Yeah.
When you don't have it as such a tightly held part of your identity, it doesn't impact how you see yourself and you can just do it because
Mhm.
you enjoy it and it takes the pressure off. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if
That
that
is
made sense,
It's
but
it is, it does, and it's brilliant because it does not just apply to competition
right.
and running, it also applies to, like I mean, I run a business, so all the women in my unit that run a business, your goals, meeting them or not meeting them is not who you are. It just
Yep.
happens to be like, "What happened this time?"
Yep.
Let's go. I wanna do this because I know you read a crazy amount, first of all,
Mhm.
I know that about you. Well, first of all, do you have a couple books that have been game changers, and what is your like, you read a lot.
Yes, I read a ton. I think I read like 28 or 30 books last year.
And you
Maybe
read them,
more.
you don't audio them.
I do both.
Oh, you do both,
So
okay.
I'll at any given moment I'll have a paper copy book and an audio book, and so I'm like, I just love it. Like I love I read a lot of fiction, but also I've read some really really great nonfiction books. And from a nonfiction perspective, Dopamine Nation was
Mm,
a super interesting, super educational book written by a Stanford neuroscientist about the impact of addiction and how the culture that we live in hijacks and rewires our dopamine receptors and how that what that looks like for you. And even if you don't have an addiction, you're still surrounded by distractions that feed off of your dopamine all the time. And so
Yeah.
that was a very interesting book. Another great one was Attached, and I can't remember who the authors are, but that was about attachment styles and how people, like, in relationships, you tend to fall into one of four categories, whether that's anxious, avoidant,
Mm.
uh, I can't remember the other one. It's like a mixture of both of those, or
Uh-huh.
secure.
Hmm.
And that was super eye opening just to identify the patterns in myself and in my own relationships. And like it helps you understand yourself and other people better, and like the
Yeah.
steps that you can take to have a more secure relationship with people.
So good.
Yeah, and then nonfiction books. One of the best ones I read last year was called The Midnight Library, and
Uh-huh.
it was a basically, I think everyone should read that book because it really tackles just because things could have been different doesn't mean they would have been better. And you
Ooh, that's
can,
good.
very, very good.
Yeah.
And you can go down the what ifs and the, oh, if I had have made this decision, everything would be better. You don't know that. And
Right.
so you have to live the life that you have and not take things for granted and just enjoy where you're at, because just because things could have been different doesn't mean that they would have been better.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, a couple quick things. One, I think I'm going to have to read this for you because it's kind of long, unless you just happen to know it. You already shared one of your favorite quotes, the sun's going to rise tomorrow.
Hmm.
Then you sent me one that was a Scott Fitzgerald quote. Do you know it off
Yes.
the top of your head?
I know most of it, but you might have to read it because I don't want to get it wrong.
Okay. All right, let me read it then. It's a good one. For what it's worth, it's never too late, or in my case, too early, to be whoever you want to be. There's no time limit. Stop whenever you want. You can change or stay the same. There are no rules to this thing. We can make the best or worst of it. I hope you make the best of it. And I hope you see things that startle you. I hope you feel things that you never felt before. I hope you meet people with a different point of view. I hope you live a life you're proud of. If you find that you're not, I hope you have the courage to start all over again. That is so good.
That's one of my all-time favorite quotes. Like, people talk about things living rent free in their head, and that quote is just, I mean, I have a tattoo from it, courageous,
Uh
and
huh.
to have the courage to start again. And it's like, gosh, I mean, the number of times I've picked up the pieces and started again.
Yeah.
And yeah, that quote is just, I mean, he said
It's
it better than I can. So
it's so good. All right. So I want to know. So you've spent a lot of time with yourself, which is so remarkable, Jordan. I don't even know if you realize that it is unusual in a good way. It's unique about you. It's extraordinary that you not just took the time, but that you really have done the work. And I know the work's not done. That's what a growth mindset is, right? It's a continuous thing. But the amount of progress, the transformation you've had in the last year has been amazing. So this question probably would have been really hard for you a year ago. But what is one quality that you love about yourself?
yeah, I wouldn't have been able to answer that a year and a half ago. But now I think my favorite quality about myself is I call it my gritty optimism. Like,
Yeah.
because before I had this naive, blissful, oh, everything's peachy, like happy go lucky, and because I'd never experienced anything bad. And it's a whole different kind of optimism to experience bad things and then still choose to
Mm,
be hopeful. So I guess maybe hope is a better way to describe it, but it's that, hey, I got knocked down and I'm sitting in the dirt and it sucks, but it's gonna get better and I'm gonna pick myself up and I'm gonna keep going, like, because I believe things are going to be better, and like there's more out there, and like there will be more good days because I will make them. I'll
yeah.
make sure there are. And so I think it's almost like a hard earned optimism. It's a conscious choice
Mm,
to hope and believe that the best is yet to come, I guess. And I'm proud of myself for that, because there were days when it would have been a lot easier and I didn't really feel super hopeful.
yeah.
But
You
I would
chose.
say more days than not, I can wake up and be like, today could be the best day ever. Today could be the best day of my life, but I won't know unless I get up and I go do something and I go live my
I
life.
love,
So
I love that. I love it. And I love that so much, Jordan. Very proud of you. So this podcast, as you know, it is intended for those people who are not content. They're content with who they are, but they're not content of where they are necessarily. They want to amplify their lives, live out loud and on purpose. So what would be a question that you would have, like if someone is just trying to figure it out, what question should they ask themselves? Where would they
I
start?
would say, ooh, I think I actually have an answer for this. I mean, I have like a million answers, but one would be, how would the best version of yourself handle this? When you think of the best version of myself I can imagine, like she has it all figured out. Okay, how would she handle this situation? Or what would she do or say? Would she go for it? Would she say yes? Would she say no? That person who you want to be, you trick yourself into becoming that person. Even if you don't feel like you are that person now, or you don't identify as I'm the best version of myself, when you put it into the terms of, wow, the best version of myself would do this, it's like, ding, 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 now you're doing that. Like,
Yes.
so I think that's a really, really good place to start, is because then you don't have to feel like the best version of yourself, but you can still act like it.
Yes. Oh, that's brilliant. I love that. All right. What can we do to amplify your voice and where can people find you?
Well, you can subscribe to Bow Hunting Whitetails, but no, I'm on Instagram at Jordan Winke, and that's really the
Where you are.
main. Yep.
Yeah. We'll put it on the in the comments part. So, oh my gosh, this has been amazing. And oh, Jordan, I just remembered that we have a first that we are going to go after this year. Both of us on our bucket list, right, is to go skydiving.
Yes. Yep.
So I'm so excited to do that with you.
Same. That'll be a blast.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for being on today with me, my amazing niece. And
Yes. Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
I just love spending time with you. Those of you that are tuning in today, remember that no matter where you are in your journey, you are already enough. There's more to you than the hats that you wear. There's more in you than you can even imagine. And there's more for you just waiting to be received. So have the courage to take the first step and live it out one day at a time, one thought at a time.